Have you ever heard a sound so haunting that it made your blood run cold? Deep in the Appalachian Mountains, there's a whistle that echoes through the darkness, and those who follow it are never seen again. Today, I'm going to tell you about one of the most terrifying legends to emerge from these ancient hills, a story that will make you think twice before answering any mysterious sounds in the wilderness. Picture this. You're camping with friends in the remote wilderness of the Appalachian Mountains. The fire crackles softly, casting dancing shadows on the towering trees that surround your campsite. Everything feels peaceful, almost magical. But then, cutting through the stillness of the night, you hear it, a clear, melodic whistle that seems to drift from somewhere deep within the forest. This is exactly what happened to a group of young campers who ventured into one of the most isolated regions of Appalachia. What started as an adventure would become a nightmare that would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. The legend they encountered is known simply as the Whistler, and it's been terrorizing these mountains for generations. Local residents speak of it in hushed tones, warning outsiders to never, under any circumstances, follow the sound of that haunting melody. But like so many before them, curiosity got the better of these young explorers. Let me take you back to that fateful night. The group had set up camp in a valley surrounded by dense forest and rocky outcroppings. They were experienced hikers, not the type to be easily spooked by typical wilderness sounds. They knew the difference between an owl's call and a coyote's howl. But this whistle was different. It was too clear, too deliberate, and far too human to be natural.
At first, they tried to ignore it. After all, rational minds don't immediately jump to supernatural explanations. Maybe it was another camper, they reasoned. Perhaps someone was lost and trying to signal for help. But as the night wore on, the whistling continued, always seeming to come from a different direction, always just far enough away to remain mysterious. The sound had an almost hypnotic quality. It wasn't rushed or panicked like a genuine distress signal. Instead, it was slow, methodical, and strangely beautiful. Each note hung in the air before fading into silence, only to be followed by another haunting melody. It was the kind of sound that burrows into your mind and refuses to let go. One member of the group, driven by a mixture of concern and curiosity, decided they needed to investigate. Despite the protests of his companions, he grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the source of the whistling. The others watched his light bob through the trees before disappearing entirely behind a rocky ridge. Minutes turned into hours, and their friend never returned. The whistling, however, continued throughout the night, now seeming to mock their growing fear and desperation. When dawn finally broke, they searched frantically for their missing companion, but found no trace of him, no footprints, no dropped items, nothing to indicate where he had gone. Shaken but determined to find help, the remaining campers packed up and began hiking toward the nearest ranger station. But their ordeal was far from over. As they followed what they believed was the main trail, they discovered something that made their blood freeze. The entrance to a cave they were certain hadn't been there the day before. The cave mouth yawned before them like a gaping wound in the mountainside. Strange symbols were carved into the rock around the entrance, weathered by time but still clearly visible. And from deep within the darkness came that same haunting whistle, now seeming to call specifically to them. Against every instinct screaming at them to run, they approached the cave entrance. What they found inside would haunt them forever. The walls were covered with desperate messages carved by previous victims, warnings etched in stone by those who had learned too late the true nature of the Whistler. The most prominent message, carved deeper than all the others, consisted of just 4 words that sent chills down their spines. Do not answer the whistle. Other messages told fragments of similar stories, people who had heard the haunting melody, followed it into the wilderness, and found themselves trapped in this nightmare realm. But the most disturbing discovery wasn't the warnings themselves. It was the realization that some of the carvings looked fresh, as if they had been made recently, perhaps even by their missing friend. The legend of the Whistler has roots that stretch back centuries in Appalachian folklore. Native American tribes that once inhabited these mountains spoke of a spirit that would lure hunters away from their families using beautiful music. Early European settlers reported similar encounters, describing a presence that would mimic human whistling to draw the unsuspecting into the deep wilderness. What makes this legend particularly chilling is the consistency of the accounts across different time periods and cultures. The details remain remarkably similar: the haunting melody, the irresistible urge to follow it, and the inevitable disappearance of those who give in to its call.
Some folklorists believe the Whistler represents the personification of the wilderness itself, a reminder that nature, despite its beauty, remains wild and dangerous. Others suggest it's connected to the tragic history of these mountains, perhaps the restless spirit of someone who died alone in the wilderness, forever seeking company in death. The surviving campers eventually made it out of the mountains, but they were forever changed by their experience. They reported their story to local authorities, but searches of the area turned up nothing. No cave entrance, no carved warnings, and no trace of their missing friend. It was as if the entire experience had been wiped clean from reality. Yet the legend persists, passed down through generations of mountain communities. Park rangers, though they won't officially acknowledge it, quietly warn experienced hikers about certain areas where people have a tendency to go missing. Local guides know which valleys to avoid, particularly during certain times of year when the whistling is said to be most active. What's particularly unsettling about the Whistler legend is how it preys on our most basic human instincts. We're naturally curious creatures, drawn to investigate unusual sounds or phenomena. The whistle exploits this curiosity, using our own nature against us. It's beautiful enough to attract attention, but mysterious enough to demand investigation. The psychological aspect of this legend is fascinating. The idea of a sound that you must not answer taps into deep-seated fears about losing control over our own actions. It suggests that there are forces in the world that can override our rational mind, compelling us to act against our better judgment.
Modern sleep researchers and psychologists have noted that certain frequencies and tones can indeed have hypnotic or disorienting effects on the human brain. While this doesn't validate the supernatural aspects of the Whistler legend, it does suggest that the basic premise, a sound that can influence behavior, isn't entirely outside the realm of possibility. So the next time you find yourself camping in remote wilderness, remember the legend of the Whistler. If you hear a beautiful, haunting melody drifting through the darkness, resist the urge to investigate. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, and some sounds are better left unanswered. The Appalachian Mountains hold many secrets, and the Whistler is just one of them, but it serves as a powerful reminder that in the deep wilderness, we're not always at the top of the food chain. Sometimes we're the prey. What do you think? Have you ever heard unexplained sounds while camping? Share your experiences in the comments below, and remember, stay safe out there in the wilderness.
If the whisper followed you, subscribe, like, and share.